Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission and our creed and our code is this: to make all things nerdy more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. Today I'm joined by Emmy Award-winning writer and co-creator and executive producer of Solar Opposites on Hulu and creator of Star Trek Lower Decks, Mike McMahan. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm doing good, Dan McMahan. How are you?
I'm good. Very excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here and talk and crash those gates. You know, get rid of those gates. Get out of here, gates.
So I know you and I know each other, but I don't think you understand. I'm a pretty big, hard-hitting journalist in my world.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question's always one that really drives people home.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite sandwich?
You know, that's an easy one. I know for a lot of people that's tough because there's a lot of good sandwiches out there. But I'm a man who likes a wet sandwich. I'm a man who likes a sandwich that is in a bowl of soup or is dipped in a bowl of soup. So I'm going to have to go with a BLT on that one, Dan. I like to take the BLT. I like to dip it in the chili, you know?
Oh, okay.
There's also an amazing there's an amazing restaurant, like a lunch restaurant in Chicago that opened up after I moved away called Xoco, Xoco. And those guys will serve you a goat sandwich served in the center of a bowl of soup. And I'm telling you right now, if you think you like a sandwich, you haven't lived until you've eaten a sandwich that intrinsically requires to be surrounded by soup.
Is it in the bowl with the soup?
It's the opposite of a bread bowl, my friend. If you take the concept of like a broccoli cheese soup bread bowl, which I think we've all seen played out a bit, it's a bowl of soup and it has an island of a sandwich right in the middle looking like a blue whale that's like emerged for air straight up, you know? And you eat the sandwich, you eat the soup, it's all mixed together. It's a delight.
I went to Chicago for the first time recently and I had one of the... What's like the big sandwich, the big hot dog and Italian sandwich?
Well, there's Wiener Circle, there's Portillo's.
Whatever I had, they just took an entire sandwich and dunked it in
the
au jus.
Big beef dip. I love that big beef dip. I get them shipped out to Los Angeles and we'll make them at home. I love that big beef.
Yeah, I was not ready for the wetness of the sandwich.
The wetness is key. You know, some people like the double dip and that's like soaked all the way through. That's just a mess. But if they do it right, the exterior of the sandwich is like molten-y wet, and the interior still has its form. I gotta say, man, that's another soupy sandwich I can get behind.
Yeah, you're a soupy sandwich man.
I really am. I don't know why.
You know what? Whatever gets you off. So, before we get into your shows, I did want to ask you a little bit about how a writing room operates, just because that's how television usually does their writing. I am not a big Hollywood bigwig, so I don't understand this quite yet. Is every episode like a true group collaboration on jokes and things like that, or how does it work for you?
Well, you got to think of it as like, in TV, the showrunner is like the director in some ways, where, you know, the director in a movie obviously is in charge of making sure that you unify everything towards one vision, right? And so the showrunner on a TV show, they're doing the same thing, but they're also doing it episodically. So the season of a television show, even though it has different writers, different episodic directors, all that different stuff happening, it all kind of needs to filter up through one person at the end of the day. Otherwise, every episode of a TV show would feel different and weird, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, when I was on Rick and Morty, like all of the story breaking, all of the writing, I was a part of a big team, but our goal was to get it so that the last person who touched it would be Dan and Justin, and that they would be able to make it. You want to get it as close to something that they can have fun with and work on and land. Otherwise, it just wouldn't feel like the show anymore, right? So, you know, what happens is you want to staff up your room as diversely as possible because you want all of these different voices and thoughts and opinions. You want people who solve problems in different ways. And then episodically, what'll happen is the last thing you want is for a writer to feel like they don't know what the fuck they're supposed to do. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Okie dokie then. So, what we'll do is, let's say Dan McMahon's assigned a script on Solar Opposites, right? We will, in the room all together on a whiteboard, break out the general area of the story so that we know what happens. Like, how does each act start? How do they end? What do you want the audience to think? What do you want the audience to feel? That kind of stuff. And then after that, the writer will go out and write a story area, which is like an outline that's only a page long so that it can get approved and get in the system, basically. Then we'll take that area and we'll break it down scene by scene. Here's everything that needs to happen in this episode. And we'll do the whole thing on the board. We'll fill a whiteboard with bullet points of like, here's where this scene takes place. Here's the kind of jokes that are going to be here. Here's the emotional turns. Here's how the plot advances. So then all of that gets written down and the writer goes out and writes an outline. It's all figured out. All they have to do is add their own jokes, maybe like zhuzh it up a little bit, maybe solve some stuff that we didn't think about while they're actually getting it down there. And that, for my shows usually ends up between an 8 and 11 page outline. Then that's a roadmap for the show, right? That all gets approved. We pitch on jokes a little bit more. The writer goes out. They spend usually like 1 week taking that outline, adding dialogue, cleaning it up, turning it into a real script. That comes in. If they've found a problem that nobody realized, guys, we can't have an alligator come in the third act. We had an alligator come in the second act. And we're like, oh yeah, right. We're in double alligators right now. Then they've solved those problems, or they've come back and they're like, let's discuss this. I don't want to undo anything that we all like. So sometimes you send them out to do another pass after you give them a couple notes of like, move this act break here or whatever. And then at the very end, well, not even the very end, so let's say in Solar Opposites, Josh Bicel and I are co-show running that. I'll do a pass or Josh will do a pass, and then we'll trade. And the other one will do a pass on our pass. We'll discuss it. And when we've gotten it, and by a pass, I mean like, we'll go through and we'll kind of like add some more jokes or maybe swap something out and put something in. But like the best case scenario is that as much of the writer's writing is retained because, then I don't have to do as much work. Yeah. So after that's done, the writer gets one more look at it. We discuss, and then usually we go through and we mark every joke that we think we can beat. And then the script goes out to the whole room and they pitch on all of the areas for alternate jokes all throughout the script. And then Josh and I sit down and pick our favorites. So that goes into the final script.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Now I actually kind of understand what it means to be in a writer's room. Huh.
It's that and a lot of dicking around and talking about other shows as you're waiting for inspiration to hit. But then once you it's a lot of nothing. And then the second you figure out an emotional story from one of the characters, then dominoes start to fall because you're like, you ever made scrambled eggs, Dan? You scrambled egg man?
Once or twice in my life, yeah.
When you get that first part of the scrambled egg, that little curd sort of forms, and then everything else forms around that. All you're looking for is that first little kind of that point of, character conflict or desire or whatever. And then you build off that, is this an episode about jealousy? Oh, what if it was an episode about jealousy and Atlantis? Then you've got something and then it's like, no, let's not do Atlantis. But you're back to like, okay, it's about jealousy. Why didn't Atlantis work? Oh, it should be in a desert, the opposite of Atlantis, ostensibly. So, that's the other part of it that kind of wasn't in the rundown I just gave you.
Yeah. With a show like this, like it's a lot of comedy and kind of a lot of sci-fi stuff that we'll talk about. But do you try to have an emotional through line in your different storylines? Yeah,
every episode. We kind of break on the Dan Harmon story circle, and it's really, you're breaking 2 episodes. You're breaking the emotional story and you're breaking the plot, right? So every episode has to have the emotional story. Otherwise the plot doesn't matter, So yeah, we don't get past the story area phase until we have something we like for the emotional story and for what you're actually going to be seeing, how it expresses, like what the stakes are and stuff.
Interesting.
Usually the emotional story, sorry, my podcasters, my cat is on my lap and he's like puffing fur into my face and it's disgusting. And I'm being very professional right now, Dan. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But anyway, usually the the emotional story is kind of what complicates the plot and vice versa. So like, you know, when there's a character who's dealing with this kind of adventure they're on, they have to get to a place where like emotionally they're forced to express something they haven't before. And that's what allows them to change their behavior in the plot in a way. So like without that emotional story happening, you kind of don't know where the plot's going and vice versa. So it really, you do them, you kind of do them simultaneously with the emotional part a little bit earlier.
Interesting. Now, it's a Christmas special, which is absolutely wild. I was not expecting this going into the show. Did it come from Hulu or did it come for you to do a Christmas special? Who was...
Now, I don't know if I don't think I've talked about this yet, but so this was season 2 of Solar Opposites, right? And Solar had been picked up for 2 8-episode seasons. And we dropped the first season on Hulu and people went nuts for it. Like it was I think we were the number 1 comedy on Hulu until Murders in the Building came out. And that's possibly because we just air them as binge. And it is, you know, the next set aren't coming till the first quarter, I think, of next year. But because we're working on them right now and we're writing season 4 right now. But so the first 8 episodes drop and Hulu is just like blown away. Like more people are watching Solar than anything else they've put out. More people are finishing the entire season and more people are rewatching it. So now we're doing the 8 episodes of season 2 and we get those in and Hulu's still like just going nuts and super happy. And I was like, you know, I have a couple more weeks before I start Star Trek Lower Decks, you know, the next season of that. Do you guys want another episode? I could just write a holiday special. And they were like, okay. So they just gave me, you know, these episodes are expensive, but I sat down and wrote a holiday special just to see if I could do it, if it would be fun. And yeah, and that's how it came about. It was literally just me being like, I've got a couple extra weeks. Do you guys have an extra, you know, however many millions it costs to do an extra episode? And I guess Solar does well enough for them that they got excited by it and they took a chance on it. You know, Hulu really has our backs. Like I've truly never seen any show before because like they've just, from the moment of the pitch all the way up to, you know, through current day, like they're such fans of the show and letting us kind of like define what it means to do a Hulu animated show as opposed to like a Fox animated show or a CBS, you know? And so yeah, the only stipulation I had for this holiday episode is that it had to air apart from the rest of the episodes I wanted it to air on Christmas Day and have them put out a huge advertising campaign saying that the Solar Opposites won the war on Christmas. And they said that was a bad idea. And I believe them. So we're airing it a little early with all the other Christmas stuff that's coming out. But I thought it would have been funny to be like, we're celebrating the birth of Christ with Corvo being really, really vile.
And also the live action suits, is that just for ads or is that in the actual episode? You
know, that's only in the ad.
That's incredible.
It was so great. Ben Bayouth and Stupid Buddy, who animate and make Robot Chicken, did that ad. And the animation at the beginning of it is Titmouse, who does Lower Decks. But Ben is just a genius, and I wanted to work with him forever. He almost won the Henson Challenge. Did you ever watch that show?
Yeah. It was the Jim Henson competition.
Yeah, where they build Skeksis and stuff. Like, it's just like these people are so talented. I love practical effects stuff. And Christmas is obviously a time you can get away with like, you know, stop motion and stuff like that. So Hulu had really wanted to do this song. And I was like, yeah, but I want to have Ben do the live action version of it kind of thing. So I'm glad you liked it. But the actual special, it's the length of a regular episode, but it's out of the, you'll see in the timeline of it, you'll be able to tell from the color of the pupa kind of where it takes place in the timeline of the show. But even though we're dropping it at Christmas, if you rewatch all of Solar Opposites, it kind of fits into the timeline of what we're doing sort of smoothly.
That cat is awesome.
Yeah, I got a cat in my face. This is Riker.
Yeah, Riker is like literally like, all right, it's time to pay attention to me.
Yeah.
Now, have you always wanted to write like a holiday special? Is this just been something you're like, I want to see if I can do it?
No, I was just high on power. I was just so pumped. I really liked writing season 2. And I was like, give me more. I want to do something crazy. I mean, all writers talk about doing holiday specials. And then the thing that got me excited about it is like, there are no rules or people to please with Solar. It's just insane. So the Solar holiday special, I don't want to spoil anything, but a lot of it is based on a holiday movie that I haven't really seen all the way through. So
that's even better.
It's almost like a parody of a movie that somebody kind of only knows about, because that's what the energy of the Solars are, like of the aliens and solar opposites. It's like they kind of get stuff, but it's like an insane person made a Christmas special. I'm really proud of it. It's really funny. And
I'm so excited.
And there was one line that was so funny and so stupid that like they sent me the raw audio of Justin trying to record this one line, and he couldn't get through it without crying, laughing, because it was so stupid. And like, it's not going to read on screen. It was just that in the moment he couldn't believe he had to say that. And it was the only time I'd seen him do that before was when he had to record Rick being like, "I'm a pickle, Morty." He like couldn't. It was so stupid he couldn't get through it. And it's akin to that. It's something that dumb. Probably not that Emmy winning, but it's very dumb.
You never know. Is there like any holiday special that's like a go-to for you around the season?
Well, I've got two little boys now, a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I've been showing them the old kind of like, Rudolph and I really like that sad one, the snowman. That's just like, do 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 do. That's like all musical. And then just, we run through all the classics. I've actually never seen It's a Wonderful Life, but I love A Christmas Story. And gosh, what else do we do every year? Die Hard and Gremlins and Home Alone and all the fun stuff. But yeah, it's so funny that like Christmas specials used to be such an enormous thing. And I used to love Halloween specials, kind of supplanted them at one point, but like, I remember just being a kid and being like, oh, right, Christmas specials are like kid TV invading adult TV time. Because Dan, back in the day, when McMahons like me were like pre-internet, you didn't get a lot of the kid stuff. It was mostly cigarette and alcohol ads and baseball and designing women and like,
the good old days.
There was no Cartoon Network for a long time, and you whippersnappers don't know how. But so the special was like, oh shit, it's prime time and there's something for me on, which always, hit you in an amazing spot. And it also is like a chance to like get the characters out of their usual zone a little bit and take on the tropes of like a different sort of theme and tone that it's almost like an Andy Warhol-esque, like, oh, everybody's doing a variation on a holiday episode, but you're going to be seeing how different shows handle it. And it's like, it's so weird that the spirit of Christmas can be handled by the Peanuts, How I Met Your Mother, and Solar Opposites. It's like that. Yeah. It's a weird thing that crosses all of it. It's America, man. It's America.
The dream. Was there any like tropes that you wanted to lean into for your special, or you wanted to lean away from specifically?
A lot of it is a parody of a movie that you'll see. And I really wanted to have a lot of heart and then completely obliterate that heart because our show's about aliens that don't mind killing people. And I don't know, I wanted it to feel like and look like every holiday special you've ever seen, and then subvert that all the time, so that like I wanted people to get mad, and like the right people should be laughing because they're thinking of somebody else getting mad. You know what I mean? Like, not that like, I actually love the holidays. Like I love all that stuff, but like the commercialization of it means that it's like an easy target. Like so I don't mind doing it, but yeah, I don't know. I think that like the tone being, like, you can see we even changed the opening credits to being Christmassy. It's almost just like, I think the tone is almost like when you go to Target or a grocery store and it's fucking Christmas time there, or a mall, and it's like, hi, we're still selling you stuff, but now there's presents and trees everywhere. Like that's a little bit of the tone of it, but in a fun way.
And you were talking about earlier how Hulu has been so supportive of everything you've done. The show has plenty of jokes about Hulu, which are always very funny.
I don't know if they're always funny, but we like telling them.
And so has there ever been anything that Hulu's like tone it down, or they really just leave you to your own devices?
There's only one note we've ever gotten from Hulu. They've never given us a note on mentioning Hulu. When Hulu got bought by Disney, I don't know if you remember that happening, suddenly we started getting a couple more notes from, there's an entire Disney legal entity that isn't standards and practices. It's just to protect Disney IP. And so we would get like our usual S&P notes, and then I'm going to make this up so that they don't, because they asked me to not bring it up. But let's say that I was like, oh, Peter Pan purposefully gave the crocodile AIDS, right? Let's say I wanted that to be in Solar Opposites. They would be like, we would rather it be a generic character giving a alligator AIDS, like that's the kind of notes.
File off the...
And so we've only had to get rid of a couple jokes and one Terry t-shirt because of Disney legacy stuff. But what the funny thing with that is, of course, that's like makes us put 1,000 more of because we're like, oh, if they're going to start, if their job is to remove me saying today we're going to neuter all 101 Dalmatians on screen, like I'm going to put more stuff like that into the show all the time, even though I know it's going to get cut because I enjoy getting, there's like even some stuff stays in and I can't predict why. Like there's a moment in season 2 where Miss Frankie, they give her a metal skeleton with Wolverine claws so that she can't go through the school metal detector. And they keep referring to it as Marvel's the Wolverine, or as Marvel's Wolverine, because that's what it says on the toy packaging. So like, there's no confusing it. And they were like, yeah, we're fine with that. I was like, all right, I don't get this stuff. But anyway, but Hulu's never told us to not do a thing. Like,
that's good.
There's one bit of vulgarity in the Christmas special that we had to change one word because it was so obscene. But the tone of it is still there. We toned it down just slightly, but it's still in there.
It is interesting that it is technically Disney Solar Opposites.
It's so fucking weird.
It's so wild.
I mean, it's so weird that I started 2 shows that weren't Disney and Viacom and now are. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Like, what was Star Trek before? Who owned? Was it
CBS? I mean, Viacom didn't own CBS then.
Yeah. So I did want to ask about Terry's graphic tees. Is that something that comes up in the writer's room, or is that like one person's job?
No. We all pitch on that, and I have like a master list of 100 of t-shirt ideas, and then we kind of we pick our favorites for each year. We do the same thing with Corvo's little intro, kind of like little blurb he does at the start of the episodes, and then we give our favorite tees to the artists, and then the artists pitch on t-shirt colors and designs of the tees. And then, that's it. That's what happens.
Yeah, the intros. I should have asked about that, but I was watching one this morning where he talks about if we love old people so much, why don't we fuck them? And I was like sitting at my desk, just cracking up.
I like those moments. It's like Corvo doing alien stand-up or something.
Yeah, it's like an episode of Seinfeld.
What's the deal with children? Where do they come from? They're everywhere.
So. You're a sci-fi guy, but the show has a lot of concepts that make the Solars themselves kind of have that very alien feeling to them, that it's just unlike anything you've ever seen. And I was thinking about the gooblering that they do.
Oh, yeah, the gooblers.
And I was kind of just muttering to myself, what the fuck is this? Where did that concept come from?
Sorry, I put the cat out and I'm ruining your podcast.
You're good.
So the gooblers were in the first pitch. They were actually, they were something that we wanted to, they were in the pilot, they were in the first pitch because there was an original home for a Solar that ended up passing on it before it went to Hulu. And the gooblers were just the clearest way for us to tell the executives that this is a show where weird shit can happen, and not just from external forces, but also from things that are ill-defined and alien about the physicality of the aliens themselves. And that, like, you know, a lot of the time when you're pitching an animated show, they're like, well, why does it have to be animated? And then part of the answer to that is when they get stressed out, they produce little dancing creatures that eventually try to kill them. And it's like, it's funny because like then they have to be like, okay, you can do that, even though it's insane because it's an animated show, you know? But I just like, you want to give yourself as much ammunition, you know, to be able to tell new stories, right? Like you're not thinking about story one, you're thinking about what is episode 30 going to be? What is episode 100 going to be? And you want to set up these templates that tell the audience that these are things that can happen. So, you know, that's partially where the Gooblering came from. It's something that actually Justin and I both, I'm sure he titled it because he's amazing at naming stuff, you know, but I knew I wanted like little dancing kind of like nuggety creatures to like emerge like from sweat glands from the characters when we were first writing the pilot.
So along with that, they have the pupa, which is just a very interesting kind of member of the cast. And its whole thing is that as it matures, it's going to essentially destroy the world and remake it in their own image. With bits like this, as a writer, are you looking to progress the story of the show or keep it so it can keep going in like a cyclical manner like The Simpsons or something along those lines?
You know, for streaming, you don't want to do The Simpsons. You want to do The Simpsons as much as you can until you don't. And, you know, that's like stuff like Evil Morty in Rick and Morty. And it's like, you know, the sort of stuff, if you watch Lower Decks, you can see that like stuff changes and it stays changed, you know, like new characters coming on the ship and characters kind of learning stuff and changing how they behave. But you don't want to throw the show away just to service serialization. So, you know, the pupa is a long-term problem, and you see as it's changing colors and like it also changes characters a little bit. You'll see at the end of season 3, there's some interesting stuff too, and 4 that we're writing right now. But you kind of like, I think of it as like, you know, when you're like, let's say Thanksgiving's coming up, right? We're all going to start cooking stuff. When you start cooking, you're like, oh, this is going to take 5 hours and this is going to take 10 minutes. So you got to start this and then move on to that later on at the last second. The pupa is like the turkey, right? It's like a 5 hour, it's like a series long thing. And actually in season 3, a lot is going to be clarified to the audience about that. And it's in a really cool episode that kind of explains a little bit more of the lore of Schlorpians in general. But then you have stuff like episode to episode, you want to feel like you're getting that comedic reset so that the show is what you recognize. You want to get both, right? And then on top of that, the heavily serialized stuff is all in the wall. So every episode, the wall is extremely serialized. The Solars kind of reset comedically because they are not only the analog for a Simpsons type family, but they're also aliens that kind of like, you don't mind that they reset. And then there are things in the alien story that long form will surprisingly come back. And that's also why you see the Red Goobler come back. Like, you know, the second the audience, I like to make the audience never be completely sure what they're going to get next. So right when you think, oh, everything always gets reset, it turns out, wait, something actually doesn't, you know?
And I do, before we get into a little bit of Star Trek, I was watching the season 2 finale again today, and the end is kind of like a weird nightmare body horror where they all die and are rebirthed through trees. What are the roots of that? Like what?
Well, you're talking about the finale of season 2 of Solar Opposites.
Yes.
Just that doesn't happen on Star Trek, ladies and gentlemen.
Scaring a whole lot of fans.
You know, the season 2 finale, my number one rule with finales is they have to feel like a finale. Like, I hate a finale that just feels like it happens, you know, like I want something that feels like there's, you know, it puts an end to something or there's a big enough thing. And the season 2 finale energy was them learning about death, like the concept of death and the finality of death for this finale was something that they would have to grapple with. and that the whole episode they're grappling with it in their terrible, unprepared way. And then they're reborn as trees, which is something we've said in the show happens to them before. Like, that's not something we created for that episode. That's a thing canonically we've said about the solar opposites before. And so, because the replicants were created by snipping off fingers and toes from Terry and Corvo and putting them in special soil. And they even reference like, one day I'm going to grow into a big old tree. But like the fun of it to me being, oh, you can have these characters freak out. You can see them die. It is this crazy moment. And then exactly like we've told you before, they grow into trees and start yelling and throwing fruit like they're in Wizard of Oz or something, like those mean apple throwing trees. I don't know. It cracked me up to be like, oh shit, did they die? They freaked out about it. And now they're trees and the pupa's eating their fruit. We built a little bit more of like the lore of the characters. And, but that they, when you see them again, season 3, they've kind of like gotten back to business and they've got their legs again and they're doing their things. But like, plant life can be deciduous and it can be like have this cycle. So it's like gooblering, like who knows what else is physically capable of these things and what their relationship with the pupa is.
Damn. It's a lot going on.
It's pretty important stuff at Solar Opposites.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm excited that I didn't realize that season 4 was already being worked on. Like I had no idea.
Yeah. I just wrote the outline for episode. I'm looking at the big wall of episodes right past the camera here of episode 9.
Wow.
So we just have to do 10, 11, 12 and that season will be written.
Damn. So your other show, Star Trek Lower Decks. I'm very new to the Star Trek fandom. We've spoken about it. Every episode of Lower Decks contains numerous callbacks and direct and indirect to different Star Trek history.
Does it? I didn't even know that.
How do you and your writers balance those references while still building your own?
The references are not necessary. The references are there because we love Star Trek and it helps set the stage and the tone for the world the characters are in. The references really aren't there. Occasionally, there's something that's like kind of cute that we want people to notice. Spock 2 Bones, mentioning Zahn, but really it's like, when you watch Deadwood, you don't think of there being an old timey train as being a reference. You know what I mean? To like another train that existed, even though it is. In Star Trek Lower Decks, all of that Star Trek stuff, all of the visual callbacks, audio callbacks, music callbacks, character callbacks, all of that is to put you into the year 2380 in the Star Trek timeline. And we are doing for a comedy show, you want to have characters that feel relatable. You want to have characters that have these emotional stories. But like, to me, it's not worth reinventing Star Trek for a comedy. It's more of just a shift in focus on the Star Trek we've seen. So part of the fun of Lower Decks is a celebration of all the Star Trek that came before it, but it's not necessary for the emotional stories. It's almost window dressing and set dressing for new characters telling stories we haven't seen. So, there have been a couple episodes about Lower Deckers in Star Trek before, but out of 800 something episodes of Star Trek, we've never run into, when we're story breaking for our characters, wait, they've already done that before. And every other Star Trek show runs into that. So the newness comes from who we're deciding to focus on, the types of stories we're trying to tell. And then all of that other stuff, a lot of people are like, oh, look, I can catch every reference kind of thing. But like, it really is just like, look, we're making a fucking Star Trek show. Yeah. I want it to be as Star Trek as possible. I want it to honor the timeline that it's in. And we're going to have a blast doing it. So like, if you're working on like, Everybody Loves Raymond, you can't have somebody mention Spock's brother or an exocomp or whatever, or a Gorn. This is the only show where I'm going to get to do that, where it's like makes me laugh. So I'm just going to do it as much as possible. And if people, know everything about Star Trek, they're probably sitting there feeling like they're the dude at the end of 2001 where like all the lights are like flickering past them as they're like, and turning into a baby or whatever. And then if you've never seen Star Trek before, it's just a bunch of vibrant, cool texture in a sci-fi world. And that's great too, you know?
Yeah. It's honestly, this has been the show that many people in my circle have been like, oh, I watched this show. I've never seen Star Trek before. Like, this is awesome. I love this.
I love to hear that, man. Cause like there's this term floating around that people have co-opted. They took this term member berries from South Park.
Yeah.
And member berries was coined as being like, oh, it's a cash grab, like nostalgia thing, which has always happened, right? Like there's always been, you know, since the beginning of film, like let's tap into something everybody likes and do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And 100% there are some things that you're like, wow, this is just peddling like a bad thing that happens to have, you know, nostalgic things kind of like hammered onto it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But something like Lower Decks, every time I see somebody accuse Lower Decks of being, oh, it's just a pile of member berries, I'm like, guys, you can't just call anything that references something member berries. Like the fun of Lower Decks is there's an entire thing that this entire story and characters and world you care about. And then there are these nostalgic things all over it. But if you don't know the nostalgic things, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I love hearing, Dan, that like your friends like it, even though they don't know what the kind of window dressing is. It's a part of the depth and the fun of it. And if without it, it doesn't diminish it. And that's why I'm like, you know, this whole member berries thing, I'm like, get your anti-woke fucking agenda out of here. I used to work at fucking South Park. Don't fucking quote South Park to me. You want to know what a member berry is? Come up with your own fucking phrase.
Yeah. Don't do something original.
Member berry me the fucking word member berries, you fucking dickheads. Like come up with something else.
I what you're saying of the set dressing stuff, it's interesting because I started watching this one before I got into Deep Space Nine. And I'm watching it and I'm slacking people who are huge Star Trek fans because I'm just so excited because I'm like, oh, that's a Bjorn Marketplace. Like, I know what that is now. Like, I'm like, that's so cool for me.
That's awesome.
From that episode as well, I did need to ask about the idea for Badgie, the homicidal Starfleet badge.
Sure.
What was the roots of that one? Because wild.
That's 6 years of working on Rick and Morty and then starting to make that's probably the most like, that's another thing I see people accuse us being is this is the Rick and Morty Star Trek. And I'm like, you know, if every episode was about Badgie, I would say you're probably freaking right.
Yeah.
But I just knew that. Have you seen enough Star Trek that you've run into a Moriarty episode yet?
No. I know who Q is. That's one I get. That's
good. Q's good. I love Q. Well, there's an episode of TNG, or maybe even a couple of them, where there's a holodeck malfunction and they're in a Sherlock Holmes program and Moriarty comes to life, gains agency and starts like causing a ruckus on the ship. And I wanted an analog to that. I wanted an animated analog to Moriarty and TNG, but I wanted it to show off what an animated show can do in Star Trek versus a live action show. And so I knew I wanted something that felt like Clippy, you know, but like Moriarty, and like took this iconic kind of Star Trek symbol, the combat shape, the delta shape, what have you, and putting eyes and legs on it and then having it become a villain. And what's really funny to me is that one of my writers on Rick and Morty, when I went to go do Lower Decks, he got hired literally at the same time. And we had our first writers' rooms days at the same time. He was running and writing the show Loki. His name is Michael Waldron. And I was running and writing Lower Decks, to the point of which where we sent each other gift bags to each other's writers' rooms of merch from our own shows to each other as like a bit kind of thing. Like I sent him like 10 Forward vodka and some Star Trek action figures that I knew that nobody over there would want. And he sent me a bunch of Marvel comics. And I love the character Bibbo in Superman comics. And he sent me a comic with Bibbo's first appearance in it. And, you know, but while he was making Loki at the same time as me, there's a character called Miss Minutes in Loki that he created. That's a tiny glowing clock with a face on it with arms and legs that turns out to be Sinister. And like, it looks like we got them out of the same brain hopper that Badgie in these minutes look like they could fucking hold hands and go and murder people together. And I just think it's so funny that like, I think that's probably like the remnants of Rick and Morty carrying over to the both of the things. Like that was what our brain had been set in for so long.
Now, in season 2, you kind of dig deeper into some of your main characters and their relationships with one another. Was there anything that you wanted to explore in season 2 that you hadn't done in season 1 with them?
Yeah, we were writing the seasons while you're watching the previous season. So while you guys were watching season 1, we were writing season 2. And we go back and we look through season 1 and we're like, kind of, now that we've finished writing it, what are we missing? And so one of the things is, we hadn't paired up a lot of the characters with each other or with all 4 of them from the 4 leads. So like, I wanted to do stuff that was more, pair up Rutherford and Mariner, pair up Tendi and Mariner, get Boimler was going to be on the Titan for a little bit. Like it's one of those things where you just wanted to shake things up a little bit. But then I was done with big arguments between Mariner and her mom. Like I wanted to explore kind of a new growth for Mariner and Captain Freeman off of that. And you'll see that in season 3, like we want people to learn about themselves and where they want to be a little bit more and not kind of like change everybody drastically. So, season 2 was a lot of like, Mariner dealing with how upset she was that that when Boimler left, she felt betrayed, and them having to figure that out in a way. And you'll see more Rutherford memory stuff in season 3. Like I kind of like to slow cook that stuff a little bit more, but still give you the feeling that you're watching a full season of Star Trek with long, with kind of serialized elements along with it as well. But the characters are like, I want to do slow stuff with them because you don't want to just drastically change people without having earned it. And so much of the character comes from working with the voice actors and trying to highlight the things that they really embody and kind of like perform really well. And so if they do something well, you don't want to have the character instantly grow past that. You want to explore it as much as possible.
With this I definitely have one written down, but the voice acting thing made me think. The Tim Robinson character, was that kind of honed around his humor? Because like, I was like, holy shit, this character is like very, very for him.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. We wrote that character and then we're like, oh, do you think we can get Tim for it? He'd be perfect for it because he's so funny and you have to make him unlikable. So Fletcher was that character.
Yeah.
And Fletcher, I wanted a character that was a dark Barclay. Have you seen Barclay episodes yet in TNG? Nope. Barclay is like the one character on TNG who is fallible, gets in his own way, is in his own head. People make fun of, like, he kind of bends the rules of like what a Starfleet officer should be. And eventually he like gets confidence and comes into his own and he's like in Voyager and stuff. But like, Barclay's always been kind of a weird character to me. And I wanted to do a character that was like that, but that at the end of the day, they don't listen to their peers and they don't embrace Starfleet. That they're like, I was like, well, what happens if you have a guy who's a liar and is manipulative and is an asshole? What happens to those guys? And the answer is they get kicked out of fucking Starfleet. You know what I mean? Like, and I wanted to watch that happen because you don't see that happen on the Enterprise, but that could happen on the Cerritos or a shittier ship. Mm-hmm. I could have probably said that in a better way, but on a ship that isn't the capital ship.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because even watching that episode, I'm like, why did I fucking do this episode? Fletcher makes you unhappy to watch. Like, part of what's fun about Starfleet is that they're all so great. So you see less, you get a little bit of a character like that with the Ensign Casey character in the Red Shirts episode, season 2, the one who's like trying to get Boimler to like leave the gang of pals he's in and like be a little bit more of like a grade grubbing brown noser with them. And that one makes a little bit more sense where it's like, he's less arch idiot, but when you're writing Star Trek and you've been watching Star Trek your whole life, it's like you take swings at stuff and sometimes it works out exactly right. Sometimes it's better than you think. But with Fletcher was originally going to be somebody that they had to bring back in the finale to help out at the end. There was a whole different plot. Mm-hmm. And the network was like, please don't bring Fletcher back. I was like,
don't talk about my dad.
I was like, you guys are probably right. So so Fletcher in the finale of season 1 changed to bringing Badgie back, which I liked even more anyway.
Yeah. So this one is specifically from Ethan. Can you talk a little bit about Jennifer, her connection with Mariner, and when the idea for this relationship first began to form?
Sure. So first season, I knew that like labeling people in Starfleet as being like bi or straight or gay, that like, I was like, that feels like, it feels weird to me to think of like a Starfleet officer being like, I'm straight. Like, it just doesn't, it doesn't feel right to me. And so I was going off of like, everybody in Starfleet is either bi or poly, or like nobody would lift an eyebrow if you were a woman dating a woman, or a man, or an entity or a robot, like that. It's like, we're kind of past all of that kind of stuff. Right. And so, you know, I think while we were finding the characters first season, because a lot of first season is you guys putting up with us finding the characters with the voice actors and the kinds of stories we tell, is, you know, Mariner reads as straight sometimes, she reads as gay sometimes. And like, I think that in first season, when we were, you know, the show is also not about relationships. Mm-hmm. It's not about romantic relationships. It's about faith in Starfleet and finding yourself and like trying to figure out how you're boldly going, you know, not in, can you have a girlfriend? It's more about a romance between you and the ship and you and the fleet, not in you and a person. Because I've honestly thought, I don't think Star Trek is the platform that I go to for romantic stories. It's the one I go to for respectful science best friend stories, you know? Like, so, you know, I think that like, but the thing is, I'm a straight guy, you know? And like, those Star Trek has to tell stories that make more people than me lean forward and feel like, you know, speaks to them. And so I think that just being kind of like dismissive about that stuff because it wasn't my priority for it comes off as being dismissive of the importance of that and not of the focus in the show that we're telling, you know, which wasn't my intent, but you only know that after you see it at the end. So to get back to your question, Jennifer appears in one scene in the beginning of the season, in the second episode, where they're back on the Cerritos and Boimler is telling the story of how he knew something Mariner didn't and saved her ass, that Mariner has kind of like put together to give him a bit of a win and give him a confidence boost. And because she dogs on him so often, realized she needed to recalibrate a little bit. And Jennifer is at the bar there laughing at Boimler's story. And that's our first moment with Jennifer. And I didn't tell them to draw Jennifer like that. The background character designers put that character there because we were still building out the crew. And I love that character because my wife wears her hair the same way Jennifer does sometimes. And I was like, oh, that character reminds me of my wife. I like that character, you know, like just like an innocent, like, you know, neat. And I like Andorians, and I just think it's cool that there's Andorians on our ship. So then cut to a couple episodes later, we have Tawny doing some improv as Mariner's running through a hallway in the Barb Brinson episode where she's like trying to save Boimler from being eaten by a parasite. And Tawny just goes, she's like, move, get out of my way. Get out of my way, Jennifer. And it just made us all laugh. And I was like, oh, actually, okay, this is where I don't remember. I either said, oh, use that Andorian I like that has my wife's hairdo from the bar, or they randomly just tossed her in there and being shoved out of the way. And I was like, I can't remember though, because it was either good luck, or I asked for it because I remember being that Jennifer is really noticeable in that Boimler scene, and she was laughing at Mariner behind her back. And I was like, this would be a person that I could believe Mariner would have a beef with, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so then we have those two moments, right? And then the very last moment of season 1 is Mariner's on her pad talking to Boimler and leaving him another voicemail on the Titan. And you hear Jennifer's voice come in, be like, shut up. Some of us are trying to sleep. and you just hear Mariner be like, oh, like, whatever, Jennifer, like, fuck you, Jennifer, or whatever it is at the end of the season. So now it's like, okay, we only know 3 things about Jennifer at this point, right? We know that she's in that one scene. We know that Mariner thinks about her at all, which she doesn't seem to do about anybody else, And then the theme of second season was, let's try to get Mariner somehow trusting people a little bit more by the end of that season, right? That's a lot of the themes of Mariner's kind of emotional stories. And so when we were still story breaking that, the original opening of episode 1 didn't have that whole Cardassian escape sequence thing. I know this is the longest answer to the most simple question, but it is what it is. And an executive of the network was like, I love this episode, but the first scene is just the ship. Like, can we start this episode can we start the season with a bang? And I sat down and I was like, hell yeah, I'll add a crazy holodeck, disconnected, fun Cardassian escape sequence that during it, Mariner is giving backstory about what's happened between the 2 seasons. And then with Jennifer interrupting her was where I was like, oh, now Jennifer has gotten into a new season. And I love seeding things that you don't think are going to become important, but you're not seeing all of Mariner's life and you're not seeing what's in Mariner's head. So at that moment, I knew that once I added her to the opening sequence of the first episode, I knew I wanted her in the closing sequence of the final episode. And I knew that since this season was going to be about Mariner opening up, that a really clear, surprising way to do it would be to have her rage against this character all season and then admit that the reason she was doing that is because when she likes people, she pushes them away, which is like, I know people like that, So it kind of came about organically until we started writing season 2. And then I started knowing kind of where I wanted it to go.
So season 2, episode 9, Wedge Douche is a unique episode, not just for Lower Decks, but Star Trek as a whole. Has exploring other crews of other species been something you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think because I love Star Trek aliens. I don't love the monoculture of them. That's a big reason that Tendy's in the show where she is, because I love Orions and I hate that, even Tendy brings it up all the time. Like, there's a lot of people, there's an Enterprise episode that sets up that there's a TOS episode where Orions are like belly dancers and sex symbols, right? Then there's an Enterprise episode that reverses it and says, well, actually, the women are in charge. It was a feminism thing. They exude chemicals that make you horny and attracted to them. They have like pheromones, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, my whole thing was like, number 1, Orions look cool. Number 2, does their entire thing have to be about slavery and pheromones and sex? Like, can't planets be big? Because there's people that are, like that on Earth, but there's a lot of people who aren't. And there's Worf, right? Like, you can dimensionalize these kind of like non-dimensionalized alien races in a way. And so that's something that's my goal of the second contact nature of Lower Decks is cool. First contact. What happens if you go back? Cool. Look, there's all of these alien races. What are the Pakleds up to? What's round 2 with them? What's round 3? What's round 4? What are the exocomps up to? Let's go spend time on a Vulcan ship. What's it like to not only be on a Vulcan ship, but you're not on the bridge? Same thing with the Klingons. Like little things. I like to give little things more mass in Lower Decks. And that's the kind of sneaky joy of it, I think, is it's like the big pitch was, hey, it's a Star Trek show about the little guys, about not the bridge crew. We've never seen this. But the real pitch would have been, hey, I love everything in Star Trek. And because I won't have to focus on blowing your mind with brand new bridge crew stuff in a way you've never seen, I'm going to go back to everything that's been in Star Trek and just start to add a little more texture, and a little more thought and a little more dimensionality to it, because that's what Star Trek feels like to me in my head. And when I think about it and when an episode ends, and, you know, that's kind of where Wedge Douche came from. That's like the ultimate expression of that.
So our last question is another big one. If you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do?
What's a Rube Goldberg machine? You son of a bitch.
You son of a bitch. I shouldn't have said it.
Just to explain to the audience, to be on the inside of this, before we started the podcast, Dan said, hey, just wanted to make sure I don't put you on the spot. Do you know what a Rube Goldberg machine was? And I made a big deal about how, of course, I knew it, and I wouldn't cause this to happen. So I betrayed Dan.
All of my trust down the drain. It's fine.
What would my Rube Goldberg machine do?
Yeah.
It would I would knock over a domino that would send a little race car down a track, that would pop a balloon, that would cause a string to release, that would have a cup of water fill another cup of water, which would counterbalance a balanced weight, which would cause a bunch of marbles to start swirling down a funnel. The marbles would go down through the funnel and all land on a board, travel along the board until they hit a little sailboat. The sailboat would then slowly creak across water until it hit a switch on a fan. The fan would send the sailboat back across the water, causing a length of string of twine to get tightened, which would lift a tiny magnet, which would cause two magnets to connect, which would cause another set of dominoes to slowly flip down another set of boards, activating a string pulley system that would strike a match. The match would strike up and light, and at the top of the line, it would burn a little piece of string, and the string would break, causing a small arm to knock all the fucking leftover Halloween candy my kids have in this house out into the fucking trash so that I stop having to see it all the time and eat it and get fatter and fucking fatter as we're heading into Thanksgiving and Christmas. I don't know why all these fucking holidays are so near each other. It sucks. I fucking hate it. I don't even like candy. It makes me feel like shit. I just need it to get the fuck out of this house. That's the machine.
No one has ever described how it actually works. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, you're welcome.
Mike, it's been a pleasure. The Solar Opposites Christmas episode is going to be on Hulu on November 22nd.
Correct. You got it.
You can watch Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1 and 2 currently on Paramount Plus.
Or on Amazon in a lot of countries, or on Crave in Canada.
Thank you. I didn't know other places existed. Is there anything else people should be checking out from you right now?
It's so funny, man. Does it say something about me where I was like, wait, do I have another show? I mean, all of my friends are still working on Rick and Morty. Please check out that show. I still love that show. Just to recommend other stuff I'm not working on. If you want something very soothing, I would watch Escape to the Chateau. It's an amazing reality show about two people building a chateau. I just read N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth books are fucking amazing. And her Green Lantern run is really great too. And I got to throw it out there to Dune, right? Let's all watch Dune and The Fear is the Mind Killer, baby. Like, let's watch out for that. You know, no fear, everybody. Let's give it up for fear. Hashtag no fear. We're going to the holidays. No fear, everybody. That's what I'm going to... You don't even need to watch Lower Decks as long as you don't got fear. That's what I'm going to say.
Thank you. You can find us at gatecrashers.fan, on social media at gatecrasherspod. And we do Twitch now, too, so twitch.com/thegatecrashers.
Ooh, damn, you're crashing all those gates.
We're doing our best. We'll see you soon.
The Gatecrashers.